did actually time this. I'm probably going to go a little bit slower just so that people can understand me, though I would like to say that in my test runs of this, I was able to get it to like a couple seconds over 5 minutes, but lots of information, really, really quick. Here we go. Like I said, I'm probably going to go a little bit slower than my initial audition. So, all right. Hi. I'm going to be talking about short games and the case for short games and how we can make shorter games that are still appealing. So, my name's Adrian Sandoval. You know me from all of these things, probably. So, since 2019, some variation of this meme has been spread around the internet as a response to the inflated expense of massive open world or live service AAA games at the cost of developers' mental health and mass layoffs and studio closures, among many, many, many other complex reasons. But I mostly just want to focus tonight on the top part in the interest of time, and because all of these other points have an imperfect yet simple solution. In this era of layoffs and studio closures, the benefits of shorter games should be fairly obvious. Shorter runtimes means lower scope and all of the benefits that entails, including less assets to produce overall, which when paired with an appropriate budget and proper time management can lead to a more comfortable production schedule, more room for polish, or even making crunch time far, far less likely. In the indie space, we've seen some examples of very, very, very successful games that keep players coming back for mere minutes per play session, such as Vampire Survivor and Balatro. Well, I pronounce that right in all my auditions. These games get players to invest literal hundreds of hours with simple but addictive gameplay and long-term goals to strive for, such as unlocking characters and abilities through currency gained every play session. And this is great for this style of game, but they aren't for everyone. Certainly not me, who has tens of hours in Vampire Survivors compared to his more easily entranced friends who can spend hundreds of hours on a game throughout numerous 10 to 30-minute play sessions. Now, typically when one of my unspecified generational bracket complains about the inflated length of AAA games, it's usually couched in the rhetoric of old age, employment, other obligations that restrict my free time. And I'm not saying that those aren't issues, but you know what? Historically, the non-RPG games I grew up with were about 5 to 10 hours in length in a single playthrough and much shorter on replays. The fact is, I'm far more likely to replay an older game, not out of nostalgia, but because I can finish it in an afternoon. But how did we get here? Well, games are in equal part an entertainment medium as well as a technological commodity, the latter of which comes with this expectation of rapid expanse. And through decades of spectacle press conferences and graphical hardware advancements, we've trained our audience to expect a level of graphical fidelity and hundreds of nearly endless hours of gameplay that, frankly, our market can no longer sustain for myriads of reasons that are too long to dive deep into in 5 minutes time. The end result is inflated production costs at reduced prices into an oversaturated market of burned out, less enthused consumer base. So what do we do? Well, speaking to Deadline in an interview, director James Gray makes the argument that the film industry has been focusing solely on billion-dollar hit makers, and because of that, has lost the broad-based appeal. And in order to bring film viewer numbers back up, we need to start investing in smaller movies with broader cultural appeal, which are cheaper to produce, but also have more overall engagement, which is what a lot of movies did like a decade ago. I have a similar appeal to games. It's going to take time and investment to retrain audiences to enjoy shorter games, but the result's going to be a sustainable industry with more shorter games that are made within reasonable production timelines. So that's why shorter games, but how do we make them but still feel substantial and rewarding? Well, through fun and innovative gameplay, of course, but we can also apply the same rewarding content for engagement and replays the same way arcade action titles like Vampire Survivor do to narrative action adventure games. In fact, this is exactly what older games did throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, even when they have a focus on narrative and cinematic ambitions. I have one specific example I'll share in a moment, but some general game design trends are multiple characters, sometimes with branching storylines, hidden or otherwise multiple endings, hidden game modes such as score-based challenges around pre-existing game locations, take place in a non-linear yet compact location, think the Resident Evil mansion, that are able to be mentally mapped. In other words, the player can look out and and map out routes without needing to check an in-game map. Rewards for player skill, including grading their performance, usually speed runs, and optional or otherwise hidden subquests, which are collectibles and destroyable items. All of these trends reward or otherwise encourage players to replay a title while also reusing current game assets and keeping bespoke, one-time only content to an absolute minimum, while letting an otherwise short experience feel substantial, whether that's through an immersive interactive narrative for players who enjoy dramatic stories and nonlinear exploration, or challenging missions for hardcore gamers and completionists. Take, for example, Clock Tower, a narrative-driven horror adventure game for the Japanese Super Famicom released in 1995 that can technically be completed in under 3 minutes. And yes, I did time myself. This is, of course, only one ending out of an 8 in the overall game, and it's not a particularly good ending. The ending is that the player receives in the game is dictated by the player's thoroughness of exploring the game and partially through luck, as a small number of events and rooms are randomized each time a new game starts. Playing the game multiple times is encouraged through hiding crucial context and backstory, which means uncovering all of the endings is essential to getting the full experience. This is further emphasized and rewarded through a list of unlockable endings that you can access anytime within the main menu. This is not unlike Roberta Williams' The Colonel's Bequest, which I covered in my Games as Theater presentation a couple years ago, where the player's decisions dictate the path of the story within a set 2 to 3 hour play session. However, a single playthrough of Clock Tower only lasts 30 minutes to 1 hour in length on average, making restarting the game from the beginning addictive in that same potato chip just one more run sort of way that Vampire Survivors and Balatro invoke, but in a narrative adventure game instead of an action arcade title where that sort of thing is expected. So yeah, to quickly recap, shorter games, they're cheaper and easier to produce. They can still leave players feeling satisfied when the game is designed around encouraging replay value for all types of players. It worked then, and it still works today. After all, I can at least say anecdotally, I am far more likely to replay 2024's Crow Country by SFB Games, which took me about 5 hours, to find and destroy all 40 Crystal Crows and get that S+ rank than I am to play a second 100-hour long campaign in Baldur's Gate 3. Thank you. That's it. Oh, thank you, Rob. Thank you so much. Questions?
I'm going to have you talk to my senior project teams before they start next year.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, scope. I'm sorry you had to deal with scope a lot before, but yeah, scope. Always scope. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Jason. The blockbuster AAA. How do we actually do that, like on a top level? I mean, it's one of those things that I feel like, well, I mean, like we're already seeing in film, right? Like we went through like this like decade of just like blockbusters that eventually just people like burnt out off, right? And like that was getting a lot of film people going to movies who weren't typically going to go see like smaller films, but it lost a lot of smaller people. So the less engaged like that really enthused base was like at the beginning of the decade, as they're trailing off, we're starting to see like more and more people showing up for things like, I'm stealing some of this by the by, which from a video from film critic Patrick H. Willems, who inspired a little bit of this talk, including this quote that I got here. So I just want to make sure I mention Patrick Willems really quickly before I say this. And what's happening is just by having more of those films like in theaters, more of that audience is coming back through movies like Challengers, Oppenheimer, et cetera, et cetera. Like those like original dramas that used to just be kind of the bread and butter, right? I mean, I think it is just, I think the unfortunate thing, and we're already seeing this, is just waiting for like people to recognize that things are burning out. Like live service is kind of in that wheelhouse right now. Or to put it, I know you and me had a conversation before that so many live service games aren't picking up steam. New ones aren't picking up steam because people are just playing the same games that they were. So there's just a cap there, right? So the thing that I truly believe is that like the only thing that's ever been reliable in this game industry are these shorter bespoke experiences that you play once and you're done with. Like they've always sold, they just don't sell to like high numbers, right? I hesitate. I know it sounds kind of dreary, but like I think it's just a matter of just waiting for things to kind of like burn out and kind of go back to that natural cycle, which probably means it's going to be a smaller industry, but I think it'll be a more sustainable one. Also, Rob had some comments too, so I'll just make sure. I see speedy coverage of just not how, but why things got out of hand. Blockbuster opening weekends began to dominate. Also reflects the GDC talk this year about limited fund ratings, resources and games versus the wide variety of movie funding sources. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why I said I see a lot of parallels here, which is why I thought it was a useful source of inspiration for this talk. Absolutely. Yes, Tom. Have I ever played a game that I considered to be too short? I mean, that is one of those things I feel like comes down to like personal preferences and tastes, right? Um, no, but I'm also a weird artsy design person who just kind of here for whatever experience the designer wants me to have. I think certain people out there, like that's the problem, is that like lately we've had this like idea of there's a perception of costs to runtime, right? That we've been like putting into players' heads for a long period of time while ballooning budgets without raising prices for games, or just like to a point where it's no longer economically feasible to like maintain this, right? So like for me, I can say no, but I'm not representative of like 90% of folks out there. Is the unfortunate truth.